time to resume our exploration of why the Final Fantasy games represent the commie and queer agenda. Today we're going to be looking at Final Fantasy V, which was originally not released in the United States. It was originally a Super Nintendo game, but it was later ported to the Sony PlayStation and the Game Boy Advance, both of which versions I have played when they were released here in North America. As anyone who has seen Aqua Teen Hunger Force knows, this is clearly a joke. However, it does utilize the Final Fantasy V characters and battle scene with Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Carl represents laziness and degeneracy, and it's fitting that someone made that as a meme online because that is actually a perfect summary of most of what's wrong with Final Fantasy V, although there is more, and we'll talk about all of that in due time. As with its predecessor, Final Fantasy V is all about wizards, warriors, dungeons, and dragons. This is a typical high fantasy type of game, and a lot of typical things happen. However, those are not the things that I'm really interested in. As with earlier Final Fantasy games, we see that this game revolves around these crystals, which are able to control the world. Now, that is a kind of Neopagan thing. Pagans have always believed that objects can be endowed with holy powers. That's also the reason why Catholics are actually pagans and not Christians. Anyway, this idea basically promotes idolatry in the most basic sense. If you don't understand the problem with this, please read a book on theology of any kind, and you will see that that is exactly what's going on there. Not too hard to figure out. Let's move on. Final Fantasy V also promotes Neopaganism by putting you on a ghost ship. And this whole idea of there being evil spirits or ghosts wandering about and attacking people or harming people is a very pagan idea. Ever since the advent of Christianity, Christians have been able to protect themselves with both their faith and with physical crosses from these kinds of threats. So again, this is another way that this game tries to promote Neopaganism. One of the distinguishing features of Final Fantasy V in terms of its gameplay mechanics is that it lets you train your characters by switching their job classes, and that enables them to learn new skills. Now, that's not a bad game mechanic, but the problem is that it does promote the homosexual agenda. This whole idea of being able to switch clothes and therefore switch your identity and your basic skill set is problematic in a lot of ways. For one, if you switch your clothes and think that you have a new skill set, that promotes the idea that you don't actually need to work hard or gain the requisite skill set through hard work and study. The other part of that is the idea that you could dress up as, say, a woman and become a woman, or dress up as a man and become a man, or dress up as a dragon and become a dragon. It just promotes this general idea that identity is something that can be changed with a wardrobe change, and that just isn't true. Gender is a binary thing. They're only males and females. That's it. Get over it. There is no middle ground. There are no exceptions. If we focus on what some of these job classes are, we see that there are even more problems. Here we see Black Mage, Samurai, Mystic, Knight, and Summoner. All of those are things which are associated with Neopaganism. Samurai are associated with the Shindo religion in China, and that is not a correct religion. It is not Christian in any way. It's not even Judaism or Islam. It's not Abrahamic. So, therefore, it almost by definition is a part of Neopaganism, or at least the idea of people worshiping Shindo is that they're not worshiping the correct gods, so they're effectively helping Neopagan ideals and goals. We see this play out further when we look at the characters in the game. One of the first characters we meet is an old man with amnesia who's clearly a degenerate scumbag named Gloop. He is a practitioner of magic, therefore making him a warlock or a male witch. He teaches these skills to others, and ultimately he is sort of the old lecher who corrupts the whole village, and that's more or less his role in this game. Gloop has a granddaughter named Krilly, and she ultimately begins as this innocent young girl who is concerned about her grandfather and ultimately morphs into a carbon copy of her granddad, except much younger and much more female. So it does show that even degeneracy and Neopaganism can be legacies if you're a bad person from a bad family. To keep up this idea of degeneracy and circle back to the earlier idea about this game promoting transgendered behavior, I'd like to draw our attention to the character of Ferris. Now, at first when we meet Ferris, it's pretty obvious that this is a male. This is someone who is a pirate leader and who uses terms like arg and R and all the terms that pirates usually use. And later we find out that Ferris is actually a girl dressed up as a boy so that she won't get picked on by the other pirates. In later versions of this game, they did 3D models of all the characters. Here's the 3D model of Ferris, and that is clearly supposed to be a dude. That is not a woman. I mean, if you saw this person on the street, you could flip a coin and you'd have a 50-50 shot of being right or wrong about this person's gender. I think Ferris is a dude. I don't care what the game says. I think that Ferris is not a female character. Ferris is a man. And this whole idea that Ferris is claiming to be a woman basically makes Ferris a transgendered character. And that means that this game is normalizing and promoting transgenderism. Now on to the two central characters in the narrative. First we have Rana. She is a red-headed red mage. She's sort of this young, lively girl who's maybe 14 or 15 years old, very youthful. And she is supposed to be our main romantic interest. And she seems like a normal enough Final Fantasy character. She's a female well-versed in magic that has its own problems. We've kind of already covered all that. A couple things come to mind, though. One is that Reina means queen in Spanish. So there are some hints that she's illegal. I don't mean like an illegal immigrant, because obviously this game's not about the U.S. and Mexican border. But what I do mean is that she's illegal in terms of being not of legal age, and that she might be engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a man. So let's look at her male counterpart, her lover, as it were. Here is a drawing from, I believe, what was the PlayStation 1 release of this game, of Bartz. Bartz is the main character in the game, and he is the male romantic lead. I want you to take a long, hard look at that, quote, man. Now, there are a lot of effeminate men in Japan itself and in Japanese art. Something about the Japanese facial features lend themselves to a feminine look. So the women look very feminine. The men basically could pass as women in many Western countries. But I think they took this one a little far, and the reason why it stands out in this case is because we've already seen Ferris, and Ferris is a woman who looks exactly like a man. Now, if Ferris and Bartz were a couple, it'd make a little bit of sense because they'd be balancing each other out. It would be a way they could sort of keep in the closet with their homosexual desires and still find a partner who meets their needs while also performing their duty to procreate and carry on their kingdoms. However, Bartz is clearly a massive homosexual, one, but he's also a pedophile because he's clearly older than 15 or 16. This guy, if you look at him, has to be anywhere between 25 and 35. This sketch isn't very detailed, so it's hard to tell by looking at fine lines or things of that nature. And the story itself isn't detailed enough to give us the details of this guy's life so we could sort of pinpoint his age. However, it is safe to say that he's robbing the cradle when he's having sex with Reyna, and that this game is promoting, once again, transgenderism and pedophilia. So good job, Squaresoft, you perverts. Despite its promotion of transgenderism through the job system and of pedophilia and the Bartz and Reyna relationship, I feel like overall Final Fantasy V was pretty tame for a Final Fantasy game. And that's why it was never released on the Super Nintendo here in the United States. There just wasn't enough there that would corrupt the public morals. So Squaresoft decided to stay its hand. The elites and the powers that be didn't really see the need to put this game out there. They felt like Final Fantasy IV did a good enough job. And certainly when Final Fantasy VI came along, they knew that one was a guaranteed hit in terms of doing damage to the morality of children. But of course it did get released later, and in that case I think it was just that the game doesn't promote anything positive, and it does promote some negativity, so that was good enough for Squaresoft. Anyhow, this has been Remarkable Republican, bringing you the truth with a truth-flavored bias. And next time we will come back and talk about Final Fantasy VI, which is arguably the most degenerate and disgusting of all the Final Fantasy games. Take care.